If a military clash erupts in the Indo-Pacific, the US Navy's top question will be, how do you sink a Chinese aircraft carrier fast? The answer might just be more surprising and terrifying than anyone expected. At this year's RIMPAC exercise, the US Air Force unveiled a game-changing capability that left China's military brass sweating. A cheap, devastating weapon dropped from the most advanced bomber ever built. A massive 39,000-ton ship was sent to the bottom of the ocean in minutes, thanks to a bomb so smart it doesn't even need human guidance. This is Quicksink, and it's set to rewrite the rules of naval warfare. But how did the US develop this stealthy ship killer? And why does it strike fear into the hearts of China's naval commanders? Stay tuned as we dive into the cutting-edge tech and tactics that could change the future of the Indo-Pacific. As tensions in the Indo-Pacific rise, the stakes are higher than ever. The question of how to neutralize a powerful enemy carrier is more crucial now than at any point since World War II. Even during the Cold War, the United States and its allies understood that any conventional confrontation with the Soviet Union would be decided on the battlefields of Europe and in the skies over them. In contrast, any conventional confrontation with China will be decided in the seas and skies of the first island chain. China understands this too, which is why it shifted much of its military resources away from its tradition of being a strong land power and into a bid to become a sea power. For a China that depends on maritime trade coming through the hostile choke points of the first island chain, there is no other option. As a result, China expanded its navy. It now has 3 aircraft carriers with a 4th on the way, aiming to increase its fleet to 5 carriers by 2030 and 6 by 2035. Each carrier has shown advancements like the Fujian's catapult propulsion system. However, these developments are not without challenges. China's rapid expansion lacks the battle-tested experience and logistical support that the US Navy has honed over decades. While the Type 004, China's first nuclear-powered vessel, promises longer missions, it still faces significant hurdles in matching the operational capabilities and global reach of the US carrier strike groups. The United States Navy has 11 aircraft carriers in service, but it cannot commit all of these to the Indo-Pacific region. Other hotspots like the Middle East and Eastern Europe also require America's attention. This reality is one of the things Beijing is counting on. China hopes that in the 2030s it will achieve local naval superiority against the divided US Navy. But dreaming and doing are two very different things, especially when you're up against the world's most battle-hardened and technologically advanced fleet. America's military brass understands this threat, and so is looking to find force multipliers, ways to inflict disproportionate harm to an adversarial China with fewer resources, and we saw a couple of these flowers begin to bloom in the summer. RIMPAC, Rim of Pacific, is the world's largest naval military exercise. It occurs every 2 years, usually in June or July. The 2024 exercise involved participants from 29 countries. This year's RIMPAC was notable in more ways than one. The United States used it to reveal the AIM-174B, its air-launched version of the RIM-174. The incorporation of this ship-based missile onto an air platform now gives the United States comparable reach to China's PL-15 and PL-21 missiles. However, these missiles are versatile and can hit targets in the skies, on land, and on sea. Thanks to their air-launched attributes, these missiles can potentially threaten important Chinese military assets in its home territory, key Chinese ships, and make any invasion of Taiwan even more difficult and costly. In most years, the revelation of these missiles, once thought to be exclusive to ships, may have been the most notable talking point from RIMPAC. But the US military has another trick up its sleeve, one even bigger than the last. The Air Force was not about to let the Navy steal the spotlight. One of the stars of the Air Force's show was the USS Tarawa, on loan from the Navy. This ship was 820 feet in length and weighed 38,900 tons. The Tarawa was built in the early 1970s and decommissioned in 2009. Named after the Battle of Tarawa in World War II, it was an amphibious assault ship. The US Navy gives the following mission description to amphibious assault ships. They must be able to sail in harm's way and provide a rapid buildup of combat power ashore in the face of opposition. This means amphibious assault ships have to carry a lot of stuff, including aircraft. These ships can do vertical short takeoff and landing (VSTOL), short takeoff vertical landing (STOVL), vertical takeoff and landing (VTOL), tilt rotor and rotary wing (RW) aircraft operations. In addition to helicopters, these ships are capable of hosting F-35B aircraft, which are designed for short takeoff and vertical landing. Unsurprisingly, the US Navy's official fact file on amphibious assault ships said that they resemble small aircraft carriers. The Tarawa was in fact only slightly smaller than France's Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier. So if you need to practice operations against an aircraft carrier, a decommissioned amphibious assault ship like the Tarawa is a pretty good bet, which is why we've referred to this ship in the past tense, because it is no more. It lies as a wreck beneath the waves. The once gallant ship became a giant floating punching bag for the US and its allies participating in RIMPAC, but punching bags are useful for training in preparation for a fight, and the Tarawa was no exception. The Tarawa was hit with several weapons. One of these included an AGM-158C LRASM launched by an FA-18 Super Hornet. This weapon is a stealthy subsonic cruise missile with a range of over 200 miles and packs a 1,000-pound warhead. The missile is also a smart weapon, able to navigate autonomously in response to enemy radar and defenses through artificial intelligence that does not require human or even satellite guidance. The missile hit and did heavy damage, but it was not enough to sink the ship. After the LRASM impact, an Australian destroyer, the HMAS Sydney, got in on the fun. The Sydney used a naval strike missile. This is a projectile developed by the Norwegian Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace Company, the same firm behind the NASAMS missile defense system. It has a range of at least 115 miles and carries an 880-pound high-explosive warhead. The test was an important one for the Australian Navy. Vice Admiral Mark Hammond, the Australian Chief of Navy, hailed it as a demonstration of his country's ability to hold a potential adversary at a long range and deter any hostile projection of power against Australia. Everybody understood who that was referring to. The missile hit the Tarawa and did more damage, but the large ship stayed afloat after this impact also. But these two were just the opening acts for the main event. A B-2 Spirit, armed with a bomb called the Quicksink, now flew into action. The Air Force started the Quicksink program in 2021, when it toyed with the concept of using standard JDAM bombs to hit a specific point on an enemy ship, including at the top, the waterline, or just below the waterline. The Air Force wanted to develop this Quicksink capability out of recognition of this new threat environment that the United States and its allies faced. With the increasing Chinese naval threat in the First Island chain, it realized that it needed to get much more involved in the anti-ship business than it had been in the past. The Quicksink program was designed to allow the Air Force to modify not only existing weapons for anti-ship purposes, but future weapons as well. One modification to the typical JDAM was a redesigned nose plug. The new plug prevents a JDAM bomb from bouncing in an unexpected direction if it hits the water. The concept was first put to the test in 2022. This test involved the use of a GPS-guided GBU-31 bomb launched from an F-15E Strike Eagle to hit a cargo vessel. The bomb penetrated the target and split it in two, causing it to sink rapidly. Air Force officials have been high on the Quicksink, saying that it's a more effective way to sink ships than heavy torpedoes. Being air-launched, the Quicksink provides more flexibility than a torpedo, potentially at a longer range. The RIMPAC test involved a Quicksink kit attached to a 2,000-pound Mark 84 bomb. The kit includes GPS-guided tail fins, which steer the munition to its target once dropped from the air. Quicksink kits also involve new radar seekers installed on the nose of the munition to help it identify and move toward the target. The Quicksink kit also comes with an infrared imaging seeker mounted to the side of the bomb. This seeker helps the bomb to identify its target ship and guides the bomb towards the target's vulnerable hull just below the waterline. The bomb detonates there, producing a similar effect to a heavy torpedo launched from a submarine. This was the Tarawa's fate in the RIMPAC exercise. The B-2 Spirit took off with the converted Mark 84 and sunk the Tarawa in this one shot. The message was clear. The United States had demonstrated its ability to sink very large ships very quickly through the platform of a bomber that would be difficult to detect beforehand. There are only 19 B-2 bombers in the USAF's fleet, but the B-21 Raider will have the same capability once it makes its debut in the 2030s, and there will be a lot of them. The Air Force has suggested that a fleet of around 200 B-21s will be needed to deter and defeat any foe. A force of hundreds of B-21s armed with Quicksink bombs poses a significant danger to China's naval plans. Another attractive part of the Quicksink munition is in how low the cost is. The B-2 Spirit might be the most expensive aircraft ever to take to the sky, but the mission it carried out at RIMPAC can be done on the cheap. Anti-ship missiles are very expensive. For example, a single LRASM currently costs $3.24 million. The naval strike missile that also hit the Tarawa had a unit cost of nearly $2.2 million in 2021. Other anti-ship missiles like the Block 2 Harpoon can cost over $2.25 million per unit. The RIM-174, now also the AIM-174B in its air-launched configuration, can cost nearly $5 million apiece. Torpedoes are also expensive. The most powerful weapon to sink large nuclear submarines and surface ships in the US military's arsenal has been the Mark 48 torpedo. This torpedo is designed to detonate underneath surface ships and break apart their hulls, causing them to take in water fast, much like the Quicksink. However, these torpedoes are even more expensive than anti-ship missiles. The latest version of the Mark 48, called the Mod 7, has a unit cost of $4.2 million in the Navy's budget for the 2025 fiscal year. With such expense, fewer of these units are produced. Only about 50 per year were made in 2017, the year after the Mod 7 was introduced. The war in Ukraine has revealed how high the depletion rate is in a war against a peer or near-peer adversary, even with weapons significantly cheaper and easier to manufacture than these anti-ship missiles and torpedoes. Ukraine's hunger for 155mm artillery shells might be the best example. Having cheap and abundant weapons on hand to deal damage to more costly systems has proven essential for an effective fighting force. This is why Ukraine's drone pilots have been such a boon for its war effort. These drones can be made quickly and destroy tanks worth millions of dollars on the cheap. The Air Force intends the Quicksink to carry out the same type of mission against even more expensive targets. Ship-killing torpedoes also have limited flexibility. The Mark 48 can only be delivered via submarine, and while the United States has the world's premier submarine force, those vessels might not be conveniently nearby to respond to an emergency. They also need to get into range that could potentially be dangerous to deliver their payloads. But the Quicksink helps to get around all of these limitations. First, it takes a cheap weapon and turns it into a smart killer. For example, the United States introduced the Mark 84 bomb in the 1950s. It has a large surplus of these that have been in storage for decades. New ones are easy to produce too, with a unit cost of $16,000 in 2021. Adjusting for inflation, the price will be about $13,500 2024 dollars. The addition of a JDAM kit would cost an additional $25,000. There are a lot of these JDAM kits lying around too. Boeing has made at least 500,000 of them since 1988. Now RIMPAC has proven that these cheap weapons can destroy large ships that can cost billions, all while delivered from a stealth bomber over a dozen miles away, long enough of a range for it to avoid most dangers. The delivery platform can also respond to a mission at any time, providing more flexibility. The operation against the Tarawa was not the only successful test of the Quicksink at RIMPAC 2024. The USS Dubuque was also a target. This ship was commissioned in 1967 as an Austin-class amphibious transport dock. These types of ships are designed to support landing operations by carrying troops and equipment to hotspots. The Dubuque displaced 9,201 tons while light and weighed nearly 17,000 tons at full displacement. Though much smaller than the Tarawa, the long decommissioned ship was also sunk at RIMPAC with a B-2 delivered JDAM bomb, proving that the bomb can hit a variety of targets. The Air Force Research Laboratory, the organization behind the Quicksink, described what it would add to America's defense posture. Quicksink is an answer to the need to quickly neutralize menacing maritime threats over vast areas around the world. Everybody knew who the message was meant for. Things get worse for China if it has ideas to get more aggressive. The B-2 Spirit can hold far more than one Quicksink. It can carry 16 Mark 84 JDAM bombs in total, so it has shots to spare. If ever deployed, more than one enemy ship could come under the B-2's sights. A B-2 operating from Andersen Air Force Base in Guam is now capable of responding to this mission on short notice. With a vaster fleet of B-21s coming in the 2030s, this capability will increase. The Air Force's Quicksink plans don't stop at bombers either. The service also wants to create anti-ship tools capable of being launched from fighter aircraft like the F-35A and presumably the NGAD. Although these fighters would likely not be able to carry bombs big enough to sink carriers in one shot while maintaining their stealth profiles, they will still pose a danger to other important ships. They would also significantly increase the flexibility for delivery of Quicksink bombs. Aside from the small number of aircraft, one of the limitations involving B-2 delivery for Quicksink is that there are only a few locations capable of hosting the Spirit. These bombers require specialized, climate-controlled hangars to maintain their stealth coating. Nearby bases capable of hosting the B-2 include the aforementioned Guam and the facilities at Diego Garcia, but it could still take hours for the Spirit to get to a hotspot from these locations. Most B-2 bombers are concentrated in Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, thousands of miles away from a potential flashpoint. The B-21 may be more robust as stealth technology has advanced since the B-2 was cutting edge, and the Air Force plans for there to be enough of them around the world to respond to an emergency, but the addition of Quicksink capabilities with faster fighter aircraft that can be stationed anywhere would make the new tool even more formidable and is likely a high priority. Adding Quicksink bombs to fighters stationed in Japan or the Philippines would be a significant obstacle for China to overcome if it intended to threaten Taiwan. The Air Force is also experimenting with adding even longer range to its Quicksink ability. In 2023, Boeing announced its intention to turn JDAM bombs into cruise missiles. This transformation would come through the Powered Joint Direct Attack Munition (PJDAM) concept. The company completed wind tunnel testing of the PJDAM that August and started to create digital models of the munition that would support further development. The PJDAM would have 4 parts: a jet engine, a pair of pop-out wings, the GPS-guided inertial navigation system found on a typical JDAM, and the standard low-drag bomb as the warhead. A typical wingless JDAM might have a 15-mile range. An extended-range JDAM with pop-out wings might have a 45-mile range. The PJDAM would be able to hit targets 300 miles away. The 2023 PJDAM tests involved 500-pound bombs. These smaller munitions can be carried on fighter aircraft, including in the internal weapons bays of the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning II, and the NGAD and F/A-XX in the future. These weapons would pose a significant threat to smaller ships, but likely not an aircraft carrier. It's not yet known if there are plans to scale the PJDAM concept up to the 2,000-pound Mark 84 to threaten larger vessels, as seen at RIMPAC. For one, the engine would need to be made larger, likely making it less than ideal to be carried on a stealth fighter. Still, with anti-ship weapons now being a high priority for the Air Force, it would not be surprising if the larger PJDAM becomes a project in the near future. It would be an ideal weapon to fit on the B-21 fleet. The PJDAM would also be comparatively cheap. Although the total price tag would likely run into 6 figures per unit thanks to the addition of a jet engine, the final per-unit price tag would still be much cheaper than a typical cruise or anti-ship missile or the Mark 48 torpedo. Against a large navy like China's, that could come in handy. Between the AIM-174B and the B-2 delivered Quicksink, RIMPAC 2024 revealed that the US military was thinking about how to use old weapons for new purposes. The AIM-174B was once thought to be a ship-based missile only, but now it can be launched from an aircraft, extending its range and potential to disrupt China's so-called kill chain, the web of systems and technologies required for a munition to deliver force to a target. Similarly, the JDAM bomb, once a linchpin of air support for ground forces, has now proven itself a potent anti-ship weapon, capable of rapidly sinking large vessels. Now, when contemplating their plans for Taiwan, China's military brass will have no choice but to wonder whether one of their aircraft carriers or other large ships required to support the invasion will be suddenly sunk by way of a bomber that they could not even see coming. But what do you think about the Quicksink delivered by way of stealth bomber? How will it influence the tense politics of the Indo-Pacific region? Don't forget to let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more military analysis from military experts.